And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist John Cowen with your Alaska aviation forecast. We'll start off taking a look at flying conditions across the state of Alaska for Saturday morning. Plenty of IFR to talk about. We have a low pressure system in the Gulf that's going to be bringing precipitation and low clouds across most of the Panhandle, all the way across the northern Gulf Coast into the Alaska Range. Farther west, we have a series of waves that are moving across the Bering Sea coming into the west coast, so IFR expected along much of the immediate coastline and up onto the north slope as well. Otherwise, the interior is looking pretty good for flying weather. Same story Saturday afternoon. We get quite a lot of clearing across mainland Alaska. The coast starts to clear out, so VFR conditions spreading west. Still some IFR way out in the Bering, though, especially across the central and western Aleutians. And then farther east, we have VFR conditions moving back into the Panhandle with some high pressure starting to build in that area. Our low pressure system still churning offshore here, so some IFR and marginal VFR flying weather across the immediate coastline, but otherwise most of the mainland looking pretty good. Getting into Sunday morning, so high pressure really starting to do its thing Sunday. We got clearing across most of Alaska, mainland looking absolutely beautiful. VFR conditions even extending into the Panhandle. The southern Panhandle may hang on to some IFR conditions in the morning, just as we have some weather coming in from that low pressure system in the Gulf of Alaska. But otherwise, again, VFR across most of the state. IFR still hanging out in the Bering with low clouds and some occasional precipitation, especially as we get towards the west coast. Some marginal conditions, again, working their way onto the immediate coastline there. And then for Sunday afternoon, still some weather along the west coast with those waves continuing to move on top of the ridge across the Bering. But otherwise, mainland Alaska looking absolutely beautiful this weekend for flying weather. Taking a look at our passes for Saturday, Anaktuvik, VFR conditions, Adigan VFR looking absolutely beautiful. Lake Clark and Merrill starting off the day in VFRs. Do have some MVFR conditions hanging out on the west side of the range, and this will be true for most of our passes for Saturday. So we do have that low pressure in the Gulf, and that's going to be drawing in moisture from the north and the west. So we'll get the weather stacked up on the north and west side of the mountain. So rainy pass again, some MVFR conditions on the western entrance there, but otherwise VFR. Windy, same thing. VFR for the pass itself. Some marginal conditions hanging on, especially in the morning time frame for Saturday. Isabel Pass, same story there. And then Mentasta looking at VFR conditions for most of the day. Coming down towards Tanita Pass. We'll start off the day in MVFR, and as that low pressure in the Gulf begins to drop south, we'll see improving conditions, so I expect VFR by the afternoon in Tanita Pass. Portage Pass, same story, starting off the day with marginal and then improving towards VFR later in the day. And then finally, Chilkoot and White Passes, both VFR all day. Taking a look at our freezing levels, we have freezing levels near the surface across the north slope there. Otherwise, freezing levels are generally going to be about 8,000 to 10,000 feet across most of the mainland, a little bit lower as we get towards this low center here in the Gulf. And as you might expect, our icing conditions, we would expect some moderate icing above 10,000 feet over the Gulf of Alaska, starting to approach the coastline here, but otherwise we're looking at an area of marginal ice out here in the Bering above 12,000 feet with those higher freezing levels over this area. Taking a look at our jet stream, we have a 115 knot jet moving across the southwestern portion of the state over Kodiak Island and wrapping around, so you can really see our low pretty well defined here over the Gulf of Alaska. 90 knot winds out of the south to southeast over the northern portion of the Gulf of Alaska there, and then right about 60 to 70 knots over the northern Bering and west coast. Coming down to 9,000 feet, again, you can see our very vertically stacked low here. Again, very well defined even at 9,000 feet. So 50 knot winds out of the north to northwest is what we'll expect over the eastern Aleutians, and then wrapping around and coming out of the south to southeast over the northern portion of the Gulf. And then finally down to 3,000 feet again, 40 to 50 knot winds across the northern Gulf out of the southeast, and then wrapping around and coming back out of the north to northwest again over the eastern Aleutians, around 35 to 45 knots. And as you might expect, that is the area where we're going to see some turbulence with those stronger winds moving over the terrain. So about surface to 4,000 feet is what we'll expect for turbulence across the eastern Aleutians and the offshore areas of the northern Gulf. And then over to the far western Aleutians, we have surface to about 3,000 feet for some occasional moderate with some gustier winds in that area. And that'll wrap up our aviation forecast. I'm meteorologist John Cowen.